Hi everyone, I'm Jake and I just put a pizza in the oven, so I have 12 minutes to show you how to integrate the Mimic Pro VR body animation system with the VR expansion plugins template project. Is that enough words for you? I've just got the VR expansion plugin here, their example template, and my Mimic Pro animation system imported to the project. First thing I want to look for is the VR character in the VR expansion plugin. I'm going to open that up. And I'm also going to open up the VR body component from my system because we're going to have to make some changes to both of them to get them to play nice. So first off, I'm going to add a new skeletal mesh to the VRE character. And I'm just going to assign it the simple mannequin from the Mimic Pro directory. And then I know this capsule's half height is 96, so I'm going to set it to minus 96 units and it should stay at the bottom of the capsule. That'll keep it on the ground for us. Now I'm going to add a VR body component, compile, and come to event begin play. And we need to trigger that set references function. So I'm going to just add a sequence here. After VRE does all of its stuff, we're going to trigger the set references function for our VR body component. And in VRE, it does not directly use these motion controller meshes. It spawns something called a grasping hand. And that's at like your main hand in game that has like physics interaction and everything. So I'm going to grab references to the left and right grasping hands from VRE. And they take a few frames to actually spawn in. So I'm going to convert these to validated gets. And when they're not valid, I'm going to delay until next tick. So that on begin play, it's not going to trigger this set references function until both the left and right grasping hands are valid. So it'll just loop until they're both valid. Then it'll trigger this. We've got our camera. Our VR origin is actually going to be this net smoother component because now my system expects the VR origin to be in the same like relative space as your skeletal mesh. That's why we're not using the mesh down here, because it's also a child of like the VR proxy component, and it's a whole mess. It makes it messy. It's just so much easier to add a new skeletal mesh up here. And then for the left and right controllers, we are going to get the skeletal mesh component, get skeletal mesh component from these left and right grasping hands. So this is left and this is right. And that's what we want our hands to follow. We don't want Visual Studio. Okay. Let's compile and save. All right. Now for the hand to controller offset, we want to go into the calculate bone transforms in my VR body component. So typically this is going to apply the tracking source to bone offsets between the motion controller and the hand bone of our mesh, but we're not using our motion controller to track our hands. We're using the grasping hands that VRE spawns in. So it already has the right location. I'm going to add some make transform nodes here on the end. It's got the right location already for the left and right controllers, but the rotation needs some work. I'm just going to plug in this scale as well. So we're going to need a combine rotators node. We're going to need to split that struct pin, multiply this and this by -1, and then plug these into another combine rotators node. These are going to go into the bottom as X, Y, and Z. I believe this is actually for the right controller. That's going to go in there. It's going to be 180 in the Z. And then over here, it's going to be 90 in the X and 90 in the Z. And then we can recombine that endpoint. And that's going to be the rotation for our right hand. I'm just going to quickly double check that I remembered those rotation adjustments correctly. Let's press play in our VR preview. Yes, the hands are lining up properly. Ignore the movement. That's not important. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing for the left hand in our VR body component. So I'm going to copy this, paste it, except we're going to move this 180 to the X. This Z should be 0. And then we're going to make both of these 90s and the second combine rotators node negative. Plug that in up there. And then the X should go straight into this combine rotators node, whereas the Y and Z should be negated. And I think both of our hands will line up properly now. There's, I think, one other thing we have to do. We're going to go into the calibrate function. So because when we save our calibration pose, it's trying to save the left and right controller's relative transform, which is usually in the play space. But since we're using those grasping hands, it's just some arbitrary number in world, and it messes up the arm length calibration. So we actually need to change these variables. These are not the left and right controllers. This is the left grasping hand. And this is the right grasping hand. I just want to differentiate because we need to get references to our controllers in here as well. So I'm going to go to the set references node. And I'm going to add two inputs, both scene components. And these are going to be the actual controller inputs. So I'm going to rename that to left grasping hand. This one's going to be right grasping hand. And our newly created ones are going to be the left controller and right controller. Compile. I'm going to promote these to variables in here and then set them and plug that back in. So now if we go to our calibrate function, rather than using the left and right grasping hands, we are going to use the left and right controller references so that we get accurate calibration data. And when we calibrate our arm length, it's not going to go super long or super short or anything crazy like that, like it would if you were using the grasping hands. So I think that's everything. I'm going to show you how to set up the vehicle a little bit too, but I'm going to go ahead and add a way to calibrate and animate the fingers. Oop, I did not mean to do that. All right, I'm going to go to my VR character and I'm going to steal the calibrate function, or just the calibrate trigger and our finger animation, which goes off of event tick. So I'm just going to deselect that, which I'm just going to use my finger animation for now. VRE actually has a tutorial on their website for copying their grasping hands finger animation, like the procedural one, to a full body avatar. So I'll leave that linked in the description if you want that functionality. It's just a little bit out of scope for this video, considering my pizza has about 2 minutes before it gets burnt or catches fire. So I'm going to paste that in here. I think, where's the tick? Where's event tick? There it is. I'm just going to use this last sequence node to send that finger animation data. And then I also need to add the input mapping context for this. So I'm going to go to their map input node. I'm going to add a second one targeting that input subsystem and using my provided VR body character input. I'm just going to go ahead and set the priority to 1 so it's not clashing with their existing input. Now if I press play, I think my controller is sitting weirdly. No, what's going on here? Why is this happening? It's in teleportation mode. What's going on? Okay, I'm gonna figure this out and grab my pizza and then I'll be right back. All right, my pizza is safe. The house did not burn down, and I figured out why we were running in a straight line like that. It's because VRE is already doing their own actor offset, so you can just select the VR body component and disable offset actor to HMD. I'm also going to disable the capsule scaling and the VR tracking replication frequency. I'm going to set to 0. That'll disable it because VRE already replicates their own controllers and camera. So now if I press play, everything should be beautiful and wonderful. Yep, our hands are working. All of VRE's functionality is working. Sorry, I know you can't hear me very well. If I turn this mirror on, I should be able to calibrate. Oh no, my input isn't working for the calibration. Okay, but everything else seems to be working. So let's just figure that out really quickly, and then I'll show you how to quickly add the vehicle support. So there's actually one other thing I want to do in the VR body component. I'm going to get this skeletal mesh reference. I'm going to convert it to a validated get, and we're only going to run this tick functionality if the skeletal mesh is valid, because it threw a bunch of error messages at me on my other screen because it didn't have a valid reference, and these are trying to reference the skeletal mesh. Because usually you set references on begin play, so whereas now it's delayed until those grasping hands are ready. So just don't run that tick unless the skeletal mesh is valid. That should stop any error messages from getting thrown your way. It's also because I didn't have the left and right controller actually attached here. That's probably why it wasn't calibrating. So we're going to use the right motion controller, left motion controller, direct references. Now if I press play and calibrate, yay, the world is great. Perfect. That's working. Awesome. So one thing I am going to suggest is that in the VR body component, you set the standing calibration technique to scale mesh to player. Because I really don't know how all of VRE's functions are going to react to scaling the player's play space. Like, grabbing and stuff. I don't know if you scale the motion controller, is it also going to scale an object when you grab it? I don't know. But just scaling the mesh to the player instead of the player to the mesh is good. It's just a good way to avoid any potential issues. What is this? Access non-trained read property skeletal mesh. Send hand animation data to blueprint. Okay. So that is happening because we are trying to apply finger animation data on event tick before any of those references have been set. So I'm actually just gonna, for a quick and messy fix here, I'm just going to add a gate that starts closed and only gets opened after we set those references. I know I'm breaking so many rules here by just dragging that right across the whole field of nodes, but that should stop those error messages from going through. There we go. Okay, no error messages. Lovely. Now, if you want to use, say, this sedan, I'm going to go into this sedan's blueprints. So if I try to use it right now, where's my other hand? Oh my gosh. All right, let's go try and use this right now. You will see that when I move the car, well, you might see, you can see my legs are running as if I'm moving that fast myself. So in order to fix that, I'm going to go into the sedan blueprint, and they've got these nice little functions here for when it sits the player down and when it stands the player up. So in my latest update, I've added support for moving platforms in the Mimic Pro. So if you attach your player to an object, you can set that object as the movement offset object, and it will transition the animation. Okay. Let me try to word this properly here. Calculate locomotion data. Rather than calculating the locomotion data for animation from the player's world space movement, it will transition into the relative movement of the movement offset object. So when we sit in this vehicle, we want to set the movement offset object to the vehicle so that it doesn't think you're running. So let's see. We'll grab our character. We'll get, actually, no, I'm going to break this passenger info because it's the only one that's in both. I'm going to get the character, get component by class. We're going to say VR body component. Going to check if it's valid. And this is all going to be from a sequence node. After we let VRE do its own stuff, then we'll do this. We'll check if that VR body component is valid. And if it is, then we are going to set movement offset object to our vehicle mesh. Yay! All right, and then we're just going to go do the same thing in the stand player up function. So this is when the player gets out of the vehicle. We're going to have a sequence, check if that VR body component is valid. And if it is, then we're just going to set the movement offset object to none. And I need to plug in that passenger info reference. So now if I come in here, press play, everything should be functioning pretty much as expected. I'm actually going to go ahead and hide the grasping hands so that we don't have two sets of hands. Let's see, that's going to be VRE core character. Okay, I'm just going to search grasping hand Manny. That's the default one. And I'm just going to set it so that this skeletal mesh component is not visible. Save, press play. And now you can see we only have one set of hands. Everything works. I really need to figure out how to change the defaults in this, but I can use everything as expected. The hand is not locked to the movement of the controller. It has physics. just like those grasping hands. And, you know, I can climb, do everything I'm supposed to do. And if I get in this vehicle and start moving, you can see my legs are not moving with me. Sorry, if I get in the vehicle and start moving, you could see that my legs were not moving with me. I really need to get a better setup with this headset so I can use the mic and not have to like take it on and off. I'll figure it out. But that's about it. If you want to, you could, like, say you want a sitting animation in the vehicle. There's two different ways you could do that. I'm not going to go too in depth because it's kind of more basic animation stuff that's just going to take a really long time for me to explain. My pizza's getting cold. But, you know, you could get a reference to, say, like your player mesh's animation blueprint. And when the player sits down, you could send it an event that, you know, plays the sitting animation you want to. So I'll just show you. If I go into the Unreal Engine 5 mannequins animation blueprint, there we go. So like, rather than using the locomotion state machine, you could have a sitting animation and a blend node that chooses between them that will choose how you animate the lower body. And then you could also like disable the foot IK trace on the VR body component when they sit in the vehicle as well. So that would be, I mean, you could just remove the foot IK trace object types. So it just set to none. That would probably be the easiest way to do it. Or if you want to have like specific points on the vehicle you want the feet to go to, like the gas pedal, you would have to define those points, send them over to this animation blueprint, and then after the control rig and everything, you know, you could do your own simple IK setup to just IK the feet to the gas pedal or something. It's not a perfect solution, but it'll work, and it's a lot simpler than anything else. So yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you guys for watching. I think there are going to be issues with there's two main features that are probably not going to work properly, and that's going to be my player scaling for the Mimic Pro. I don't know how VRE is going to react to player scaling, and my system is not gonna react well to like going upside down, I don't think. Oh, well, it's doing okay, actually. What if I go over? Oh, okay, it's not half bad. It's better than I expected. But okay, so that might be okay. We'll see. I might make a more in-depth tutorial in the future, but I wouldn't hold your breath. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you found this really helpful. Leave any questions or concerns in the comment section, or actually don't leave in the comment section. I have my contact info and a Discord server and everything where you can get help with the system. So I'll leave all that in the description, along with VRE's tutorial for copying finger animations to the full body avatar. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you found it really helpful. I will see you all later. This was a much longer tutorial than I initially expected it to be. Bye.